There are a select few artists who are boundaryless. Frank Ocean, Pharrell, Beyonce, Kanye West. Artists who you learn to expect the unexpected. Childish Gambino is on the verge of being in this territory. Thanks to everything he's created, his art is being taken more seriously than a lot of his contemporaries. But it wasn't always this way for Gambino. In fact, his early beginnings in music were quite the opposite, receiving some of the harshest reviews in music history, calling him an actor trying music. People often called him corny or trying too hard. However, Gambino was able to change the narrative on himself and become one of the most respected artists in the world. Although this didn't happen overnight, there were a few key moments that shifted everything. Let's dive into how Donald Glover became Childish Gambino. Donald, at the age of 23 and freshly out of college, was sending out spec scripts to TV shows. Spec scripts are basically mock scripts you make of already popular shows. He sent one to the producer of 30 Rock, which was about a fake episode of The Simpsons where Homer illegally downloads music and gets sued by the duo Hall & Oates. They were so impressed with it, they hired him as a writer. This is the moment that Donald Glover's career started to take steam, but he's still very far away from the artist we know today. For 3 years, he wrote and made appearances on the show. After having a successful career there, Donald took on another role at NBC. He'd play a former high school jock named Troy for the show Community. This is personally where I first got to know who Donald Glover was. And around this time is where he started to pursue music even harder. He had a few mixtapes under his belt, as well as some DJ remix albums at this point, but nobody considered him a musician yet. While shooting Community, Donald Glover met the show's composer, Ludwig Göransson, a name that you might be familiar with already. This was a crucial moment in both of their careers. As Donald started to invest fully into music, Ludwig was his second-hand man in production, and would be for the rest of his career. And with this, Donald Glover finally chose his name, Childish Gambino. I wish I could say this is some crazy story, but no. He literally typed his name, Donald Glover, into a Wu-Tang Clan name generator. That's it. Would go on to release a handful of mixtapes while also filming for Community, including the EP Cul-de-Sac, which, after its release, was by far the most popular project he's released at this time. The song Do You Like was starting to get rumblings in the underground rap scene, and he was starting to make waves. The year is 2011. Donald, or Childish Gambino, releases his EP. This was an absolute pinnacle moment for Gambino. If Donald has a handful of fork-in-the-road moments in his career, this is definitely one of them, mainly because the song Freaks and Geeks was on this EP. This is the first song I actually heard personally from Donald Glover. Many thought it was weird seeing Troy from Community go so hard on a rap song. It was being passed around all those underground song blogs. This song quickly made the waves like nothing he'd ever released. It was truly a breakout moment for him. With the iron so hot right now, Donald had to strike quick. So 8 months later, he released his debut studio album, Camp, with again the help of his buddy Ludwig. I love this album when it came out. Firefly, Kids, Sunrise, Bonfire. This album holds a special place for a lot of people. It might be nostalgia, but who cares? However, if you know the story around this album, you're probably waiting for me to bring up one specific thing. Pitchfork in all its glory virtually stabbed Donald Glover in the heart with their review. It's just a review, how bad could it be? Well, they gave him a 1.6 out of 10. One of their most infamous reviews as being one of their worst. Quote, preposterously self-obsessed, but not the least bit self-aware. Tell me that ain't insecure. And this is the face of a growing crowd of people who don't like his music despite the success he's having. While this moment should have been Donald's breakout moment of his career where his music finally gets the attention it deserves, and it did, but the negativity towards him had never been higher. During the Camp era, one of the biggest criticisms of his music was its lack of depth, and his lyricism was corny. Old school hip hop fans who demanded a level of intellectual lyricism and to fill a certain type of rapper turned away. Donald said in 2011, rap used to be silly, and now it's sillier than ever. I find that idea very freeing, and this approach ran very thin on a lot of critics. He took every moment to fight against the cultural standards for rappers, and people didn't like that. Donald went on to create the mixtape Royalty the following year. This was his chance to test the waters after his big success. If you like Gambino, you'd like this mixtape. If you don't like Gambino, you wouldn't like this mixtape. It's simple as that. It was basically an extension of Camp with some better features. He did a great job of feeding his fans more of his music and maintaining the hype of what he was about to do. But when the critics wanted Donald to create something deeper and more thought out, this was the moment he morphed from really talented guy to one of the great artists of our last decade. Instead of turning his nose at the criticism, he learned from it and got better. The year is 2013. Donald is slowing down his appearances in Community, writing this note on Instagram stating it's not to rap, but more so to focus on his new show that's in development, Atlanta, and to be on his own. But during this year, Gambino begins to roll out his next big solo musical project, Because the Internet. Donald took intentionality to a new level, with this being a multi-layered project showing off all of his creative tools. Donald designed the album to be accompanied with a 72-page screenplay, which was intended to have the album played as the story unfolds. The entire album centered around the internet culture in 2020. 2013. He made the album cover an animated GIF, announced the tour on a live stream with an adult star, and named the tour the Deep Web Tour. There was a ton of thought that went into this project, and some people started to finally come around to Gambino. Complex rated it the 10th best album of the year, XXL rated their 15th, and is well regarded as one of the more underrated albums of this era. However, this album too still didn't come without a lot of hate. Even though over time it's gotten more love, when it came out it had barely above the ratings of Camp, which honestly isn't saying much. Despite his efforts, it seemed like his unique style just wasn't getting fully embraced by critics and reviewers. But what he did next is what truly created Childish Gambino. These next few years for Donald is where he proves that he's up there with the Frank Oceans, the Kanye Wests, the Beyoncés, and Pharrells. And it was the next three things he did that made this happen. Let's look at all three and see how they stack up. In 2016, a project 3 years in the making made its debut. Donald Glover's original show, Atlanta, saw its premiere in September of 2016. Donald stars, writes, produces, and sometimes directs everything about this show. It's his baby, and he poured his soul into it, and it absolutely paid off, scoring absolutely insane scores online and receiving a plethora of awards to back it up. And some would even argue he's an even better writer and producer than he is a song creator. However, while premiering Atlanta, Donald would do one of the most surprising things he'd ever do. Let's rewind from September to June 2016, where Donald Glover finally ended his musical hiatus, tweeting this, which was a link to his app. This app revealed that he would be performing brand new songs at Joshua Tree early September, the same week his show Atlanta would be premiered. The new songs he performed were to be on his next major album, Awaken My Love, a massive creative shift from his previous work. Previously, he created exclusively rap and R&B. This album was heavily inspired by funkadelic soul, and the reception was overwhelmingly positive. Nobody expected this shift from Gambino, nor did they think he was capable, but he didn't care what his audience expected from him, a trait not many creatives have. But there was one more thing that fully created the Gambino we know today. Fast forward 2 years. In 2018, with a major political shift in America, the issues between black and white America are reaching a very tenacious point. Gambino, a creative who often touches on social and political issues, decided to create something in response to the state America is currently in at the time. On May 6, 2018, Childish Gambino released This Is America with an accompanying music video. This song ended up debuting on Billboard at the #1 spot and was an overwhelming success in terms of sales. The video was heavily analyzed by the world, with every frame being a thought-out reference to a moment in history or culture. It was the first time Childish Gambino's art was center stage to the world. It finally became known that Donald Glover was no longer just an SNL writer or a character on a TV show. He's an artist whose art demands your attention, and Pitchfork rated it the best new track of the week, a significant change from him once being a 1.6 rated artist. But his story doesn't end there. Childish Gambino is at an all-time high, releasing 2 highly praised albums and some singles that are crushing both commercially and culturally. His response is being eagerly waited for by the entire world. We didn't find out until 2020 to hear his 4th studio album, 3/15/20, a mysteriously titled album that not only has no cover art, but the song names are ambiguous, and the album wasn't initially available online except for his website, donaldgloverpresents.com. Commercially, this album did not do great. It's a good example of an artist trying to be mysterious but not meeting the consumer halfway. And there's a lot of people who still don't know this album exists. It's not a bad album by any means, but people expected a lot more from coming off of an all-time run he'd been going on. But Childish Gambino, in the year of 2024, is back to making music, and I think he's at another fork in the road. His musical momentum had been halted pretty hastily from 3/15/20. To avoid going back to where he was before Awaken My Love, he has to bring some of that old Gambino magic back, as well as do something we'd never expect from him. And been following Childish Gambino his whole career, I think it's safe to expect that. Thanks for watching.